I see Lululand as a financing partner, and because I've got this partner, they've taken away the pain of worrying about cash flow. Then you can focus on what you really need to do. I would recommend Lululand at any point in time.
Dex Prepare. Make bookkeeping more profitable. Prepare your accounts automatically. Hours saving software to automatically fetch all your business data into one single view. Connect to over 1,400 suppliers to automatically fetch invoices, statements and bills. Dex Prepare.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for joining. I'm Tom Stewart, Chief Marketing Officer at Lululand. And on behalf of everyone at OnlineX and Lululand, I'd like to welcome you to this first installment of the Business Finance Bootcamp series. At Lululand, we've made it our mission to do everything we can to help South African SMEs grow and prosper. And that's why we're so excited to bring you today's webinar, where we'll talk all about leadership. We've got some great speakers ready to share some fantastic insights and tips with you all on a range of topics, including the top 10 traits required to become a successful leader, how to effectively motivate and lead a team, and why good business financial processes will help your business. So without further ado, I'll hand over to today's host, Grant from Alto Growth, to get the session started. So over to you, Grant.
Thanks so much. Tom. And again, a massive thanks to Lululand for sponsoring or bringing this business finance bootcamp, which is on the platform of OnlineX. My name is Grant Creef, and I'm the founder of Alto Growth, which is in the business consultancy game. And today I'll be facilitating the fundamental topic that we've always been thinking about, which is leadership. And if you would like to find out anything more about myself and the panelists as I introduce them, please do go search on LinkedIn and you'll find them there as well, because they're very active around sharing their experiences and their philosophy on leadership. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Wadzanai Mabuto. Wadzanai. Great. So Wadzanai Mabuto is a senior lecturer at UJ and the founder and director of the Gifted Learning Center. And the reason why this is so amazing is because that she's actually created a children's book where it's been translated into so many African languages. So everyone from across Africa and actually around the world is able to read it. So I think before I get into that, Wadzanai, I'm going to move quickly to introducing Kenneth. So Kenneth Kritzer, the co-founder of Dough Getters Accounting, which I'm sure everyone has heard of. They even won Zero Partner of the Year last year. And he now is currently in the Business Made Simple coaching environment. So Kenneth, a big warm welcome to you as well. So I think Wadzanai, instead of us asking about, your background, I mean, people can search that on LinkedIn. Tell me a bit more about what you're currently doing right now.
Wow, that's a loaded question. Thanks, Grant, for having me. There's quite a lot of things that I'm working on at the moment. But the main thing I'm working on, as you alluded to, is this children's book that I came up with the idea during lockdown, actually, when we dared to could do it better than the teachers. So we took our kids out of school and then we thought we're going to teach them. And then we were trying to teach them our Shona language and it was just not working. So that's when the project came to say, look, let's create this book with everyday words for children. And then after that happened, people were asking me, do you have it in Setswana? Do you have it in isiZulu? Do you have it in Xhosa? It in Swahili, Kiswahili, and Yoruba, which is in Nigeria, and their project of translating it into, it's now 13 languages. But yeah, so currently right now I'm running. It's amazing. I never thought that it would be anything bigger than just a book to help us homeschool the kids. And yeah, so I'm also currently developing an online program for my university students to help themselves. Because my philosophy in teaching is to teach my students how to be responsible and to give them the tools. So we're currently going to launch that in July, so that we're using digital storytelling, we're using gamification, we're using all sorts of nice tools to help our students. So it's launching for the first year at the University of Johannesburg in July. So we're currently working.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Well, we have the like nafuna eskolweni some. So I studied Xhosa instead of Afrikaans. So I know my surname is Greep, but I don't actually speak Afrikaans. So I think that's quite yeah. I really am excited. So I'm definitely going to look out for the Xhosa book. And
Absolutely.
then I'll quickly move on to Kenneth. So Kenneth, right now, what are you up to, just so that everyone understands and actually really wants to get that background around what you've been involved with?
Thanks, Grant. I just want to just throw it out there that I'm very pleased to be called a co-founder of Dough Getters, but I was like the second or third franchisee, but still feel like a co-founder. I think that I'm about as old as the accounting profession, so I'm allowed to be called co-founder of some stuff. I joined Dough Getters about 2 or 3 years ago when it was still a good idea, and we've really gone from strength to strength in that. I was in corporate for about 20 odd years doing various things internationally, and then moved down to Cape Town with my wife, decided to raise the kids in a better environment. And that better environment ended up with me commuting between Hermanus and Cape Town. And that I realized was for the birds. Phoned Willem from Dough Getters, and the rest is history. And then we got involved in we're working in the accounting space, but by and large, we are trying to create healthy and worthwhile lives for the people we interact with. We think that entrepreneurs spend so much time living alone and struggling across a whole host of challenges that we felt that we wanted to come alongside them and use our accounting skills to support them and take some of the nightmares that follow bad practices away. And as that happened, we started progressing into the call it the coaching consulting space. I don't really like those words because I think you learn as well as teach when you're involved with anyone who's in business. And we realized that there was a really big need to extend what we were doing into helping guys understand how their marketing works, how to grow their business successfully, how to manage people. But we wanted to do it in a way that made sense for the guys out there, not just our experience. So we went looking for something that we could bring to South Africa, which is internationally well established. And that's how we found the Business Made Simple University. We've got a really nice structure in which we are able to coach people into growing their businesses, and we've used it successfully in ours. So I'm actually really excited to share some of that. But more than that, I'm keen on learning a bit about writing children's books and a bit of Xhosa if I can get to it at the end.
You got to do the click, eh? Brilliant. Well, thank you so much, Kenneth. And co-founder definitely of the franchise. I'll definitely claim it. So I think the most important, the purpose of why we are here today is for you, the audience. You're watching right now, and I think the most important thing around this is really to view this as a discussion, because today we're going to be going through 4 key elements around leadership, around what exactly leadership is, why leadership is so important, how to practice it, like what is the practical aspect of leadership, as well as then the future leader, discussion around who that person actually looks like. And so for today, if you've got any questions, post them in the comments, and I'll try and make sure that I thread them in as I'm chatting with Wads and I and Kenneth. So I think let's first start on actually what leadership is, because we hear, we've got the textbooks about it, we've got the online content, and we've got particular people that are sharing around leadership that set that example as well. And we need to just first get into that fundamental, because what it is. And I'll start us off here, and I'll go to you, Wads and I first, where in my view, I think the one word that jumps to me when I think of leadership around what it actually involves, what it is sacrifice. And I think, along the whole servant leadership, as a lot of people are coining it today, but tell me about, from your background now, what you view leadership to be.
So thanks, Grant. there's an old Chinese proverb that goes as follows. It says, if you think you're a leader and nobody's following you and you're just simply taking a walk. And I remember when I read that in one of the leadership books I was reading as I've been taking the walks that I've been taking, then I automatically thought, so I'm not a leader because nobody's following me. Most of the projects I do are very solo and people jump on board as and when I'm walking. So I tend to not try and compartmentalize the definition of leadership, because I believe leadership is, as you said, sacrifice, and it is growth. And with sacrifice, with growth, you need to sacrifice a lot of things. And in my own journey of leadership, the definition that is quite apt for me in my journey right now is the ability to turn a vision into reality. Because it's one thing to see something and be able to see it. It's another thing executing it, because motivation is not going to get you through the dark days, through the lonely days. And I know Kenneth alluded to that, to say it is a very lonely journey, and finding the right people on the team to be with you is something. So to answer your question, for me, particularly the journey that I am right now, is having that ability to lead yourself before even people come and jump on board. But when they do jump on board onto your vision as you're executing it into reality, to be able to absorb those people that come on board. Those are two completely different skills, and yeah, you learn as you go. So I am still learning, I'm still growing, I'm still sacrificing and hoping to get to seeing it in fruition.
So our famous Grant has left the building. Once and I really loved what you were saying there. And I think in particular, I know that sacrifice can sometimes be a real challenge.
Yeah.
But I love the story that you're telling, because for me, if I look at the way leadership operates, it always begins with an inward journey and continues always to be an inward journey.
Yeah.
But if you become too self-introspective, you
Yes.
actually end up in a little corner doing very little, but writing famous articles on how to be a leader. At some
Yes.
point, you need to express it. There has to be a bias for action, and I think that the writing of the book and the way you've expressed yourself in that sense is definitely you put yourself out there. I think another really important aspect of leadership is the ability to deal with conflict. The higher you rise, the more problems you have to solve. And I love that session when we first got to know each other, and I'd love you to
Yes.
talk a little bit about that, is the fact that you said that you were gone to all this trouble of building this repertoire of languages in this book, and then someone told you that you'd insulted their home language because you hadn't
Yeah.
used words that they found useful in 1992 or
Yes.
91 or in 1824. And
Yeah.
I'm being a little disparaging, and I apologize to those first language speakers. But it'd be great if you could tell us a little about that story.
Yeah, thanks so much for that, Kenneth. And I'd like to add that your leadership style is quite amazing. To everybody listening, I only literally met Kenneth literally last week and just had this conversation. His amazing ability to weave through and listen and see different aspects. So to jump on that, it's amazing that it's that sacrifice that you have to have, and that strength to see through the feedback that you get. So once you put yourself out there in leading a vision or a project or whatever you're trying to do, you're putting yourself out there and people are going to have magnifying glasses. I once had a podcast with Grant, and I remember I said to him, the poem that reminds me of him is The Man in the Arena. It's easier to critique than it is to actually put yourself in the fire. So I remember the day it happened where I got really critiqued. And then I had to have a conversation with people that look like the people who were critiquing me. And I'm meeting them for the first time, when I was meeting Kenneth and Grant for the first time. And it was an amazing experience, because having to absorb that criticism and being accused of something that you had no intention of, So basically the gist of the story is I made a translation of a particular language, and I used words that I used every day, and I didn't use the words that I used that were, like Kenneth said, were used in 1822. And this person took so offense to that and demanded me to take the book off publication. And I was really taken aback. So it's those punches that you go through as you build. And I believe that building your character as a leader is so important, because it's with these punches that you get back up and you say, okay, after the tears, let's be honest, these things affect us. After the tears, you get up and you realize, okay, what can I take from this? What can I do? What can I make sure and see through all the emotions and respond to my customer in a way that makes her feel heard, makes her feel validated, but at the same time, not making myself feel like insignificant, because leaders are constantly dealing with imposter syndrome. We're constantly dealing with that in our minds, thinking, what have I started? Who am I to think I can do this thing? So you constantly have that at the back, and then someone comes and confirms it. But it was conversations with you guys when we had the pre-meeting before that healed me through that process. And I said, okay, you know what? This is it. We're not against anybody. We're here to unite. We're here to unify each other. So yeah, no, it was quite an interesting experience that I went through, Kenneth. And I thank you for almost catching me while I was going through it, because we literally spoke as I was going through it.
Wes and I think, apologies for, call it the ESCOM glitch, but
no problem.
I think the big thing that I'm picking up around, what leadership is, on both from Kenneth's point of view as well as yours, is purely around being able to, in a space of not necessarily, in a space of adversity even, being able to push through based on a very, very strongly held a vision around how you see the world. And then trying to explain, whether it be through the example that you set, i.e. through your actions, and of course through the actual constant or the consistent approach to sharing this vision with others, so that they buy into it as well, because they are aligning around from a value point, or aligning from a culture point. And so I think specifically around there, tell me a bit more, and I'll jump to Kenneth now. Tell me a bit more, Kenneth, that if you think about the example of what leadership is, what example does it look like? If I were to now, put it up on this board behind me, like, what does it look like? How do we spot it? All right, so that we can actually start at least looking at it from a way where we can then start adopting it into our lives.
Thanks, Grant. I think that there's so much one could say on that. So I'm just going to kind of hone in on one thing. I'm assuming we're talking to business owners or people who aspire or got great careers and they're trying to build on that. And if I could choose one key characteristic now, to just to put it in capitalist terms, is to see yourself as the economic product of value. And what that means is the kind of person that reduces frustration in other people's lives. You solve people's problems, and you're obsessed with giving people a great return on their investment. If you focus on those three things, then inevitably you're the kind of person that becomes the best investment that people possibly can be. And that's pretty much the outward expression. There's a whole lot of characteristics which support that, such as being able to go and seek criticism, because if you're growing, you don't have a fixed mindset where you think you can't change. Just as an aside, that's something, if I have to call for a frustrating thing, is people who say, this is just the way I am. I think that everybody can improve in anything that they set their mind to, whether it's playing the guitar, whether it's speaking a foreign language, whether it's overcoming, a history of victimization. The stories of heroes that run into that sort of space are, the ones that we tend to be attracted to. And I think the easiest way to spot a leader is very much what Wads and I said. There's other people following them. It's not a lone mission on going crazy. the last thing that I'd like to say on that is I have a very strong preference and personal view that a great leader leaves a legacy that allows the organization to move on without missing a glitch. And that requires a level of humility and staying out of the spotlight. So that people say, as I said in some of my promos, when you have stepped out of the limelight and left the spot, everybody looks around and said, we did it ourselves. And not worrying about, oh my goodness, that hero who runs this company is gone. Whatever are we going to do? I hope everybody sees themselves as a leader. If you're the right type of leader, everyone else sees themselves as a leader in their own right.
I love that, Kenneth, and I think specifically around around sharing in the context of leadership that there is no title that you need to fill in order to then therefore qualify as a leader. And so I think, and Takunda actually, one of the audience members posed a nice question that I want to actually put to Wads and I here, because I mean, you're involved with now children, is the fact that if you were to explain leadership to an 8-year-old, like what would you describe leadership as to an 8-year-old?
That's quite an interesting question because I do have an 8-year-old daughter. Exactly like me, and yeah, it's quite an interesting relationship because I see myself in her and she sees herself in me, so it's always good to have this walking mirror that follows you. I think leadership boils down to influence. I'll use an example of my 8-year-old. I'll use a really true example. So they went back to school. We decided the homeschooling wasn't working, so they went back to school for the first time this year. And there were certain rules because of COVID that were happening, that they couldn't play catch and tap. I don't know these games that they play as kids. Then she came home that day and she said, Mama, nobody wants to play with me. And I asked her, why doesn't anybody want to play with you? And she said, it's because I'm following the rules and I don't want to play catch because everybody's playing catch, but teacher told us we do not play catch. So I then said to her, and so at that moment, you're almost like in a dilemma as a parent. I'm not sure if it is a dilemma, I don't know, but I found myself in a dilemma. What do I tell my child? Man, just ignore the rules and just go play, have fun. Or do I tell her, stay strong in your convictions, in your belief? And as you stay strong, people will start looking at you because it's human nature. We always look at, why is that person not doing like what the rest of the people are doing? Let me go find out what she's doing. And in a way, I took her for a walk, with kids, you can't just come. My personality is a commander. I'm always looking for solutions. And I've had to learn, like what Kenneth says, I self-reflect and I had to learn in my commander nature, I have to take people's feelings into account. Because when I'm in a go, I very rarely think of people's feelings. But as I self-reflect, I've had to realize, take people's feelings into account. So I took her for a walk. I made sure that she was comfortable. Then I replayed the scenario to her because I believe a leader is not about telling somebody what to do. A leader is about showing somebody that they can do what they've wanted to do. And they need that reassurance to say, this is my.
So I don't know, I think
what
maybe
are the consequences of you playing tag? What are the consequences of you sticking alone? And literally for a week, she was alone.
All right, so I'm gonna move to Kenneth now because Wads and I mentioned something very important there. So Kenneth, the big thing here around the leadership aspect is showing people, all right? And that is fundamental to what we all need to understand going forward is how do you show people? And I think that also goes to the point that you spoke around legacy, right? And what is legacy in the context of leadership that you've experienced? You're on mute.
2 years doing, almost 2 years doing Zoom calls, and I'm still doing that little stunt. Thank you. I think, just to backtrack a little bit, I mean, my view on leadership is really about telling a great story. And I think I got that. I had a grandmother who grew up in Oma, grew up in the Karoo. And I was very lucky that in my sort of teenage years, she moved into the house with us. And Sunday lunches completely took a new dimension, where she would tell stories, but all her stories had a great moral. And I think that I've always gravitated to great stories in that case, and that's why a lot of the things that we've been learning through BMSU resonates. But to talk about how you know institutionalize leadership or create a legacy, or what does it look like, is as a leader you need to invite people into a story. And we can get into the detail of that, but I'm just going to sort of touch on the top things. If you have a compelling story, so reading your profile, for example, Grant, is a compelling story. Young guy making it great, influencing others, a positive force for good. That's a great story. Then the next step is to explain to people why that story matters. And usually it's an aspirational vision. You know, when they tell the story of when Microsoft guys were sitting around a table and they were saying, we're going to make great computers, we're going to make great software. And Bill Gates looked over to them, guys, no, we're not going to make great software. We're going to change the world. Now that's a story that matters. And they did. Everybody, the tech we're using today, in some level, is founded on the aggressive competitiveness they introduced into the tech space. And then finally, the institutionalization of it is that you have to give every team member a role to play in that story. Whether it's the person who's answering your phone or washing the floor or dealing with the sales pipeline, they have to know their role in the story. Otherwise, they start getting lost, and you get a lot of like people trying to create a vision for themselves, and they get frustrated with their career aspirations. And that normally manifests when they don't know what their role in the story is.
Brilliant. And Kenneth, I think that for me resonates around the fact that, so in leadership and in leaving that legacy, the most important or the most attractive, influential way of how someone practices leadership is very much when people can relate to it, where they actually are drawn and they all of a sudden see themselves in that particular environment. They see themselves being able to reach that particular vision or become part of it. And they have this deep energy that then actually arises from being able to contribute towards something far bigger than themselves. And I think, you know, just from our personal experience, if I share here around leadership, is that if you're able, all right, to share a vision and to share, like you were saying now, through story, and someone relates to that and they buy into that, that is the biggest way of igniting that undiscovered potential in someone. And I think that leads us to, you know, the next category now, the next kind of topic around why leadership is so important. Because if we look at why leadership is so important, there's a framework here, you know, where many people, all right, sit in a space where they don't know what they don't know. And so therefore, you sit in a space where you don't necessarily know if what you are doing is what you should be doing. And that's when you align with a leader, someone that can actually see what's in you that you actually don't even see. And then that ignition or that ignite, that spark that they catalyze from you, that then demonstrates the movement. So I think, Wads and I, from your side, if you think about now, you've been dealing with so many people, young individuals in South Africa, over 1,000 people you've dealt with, right? And you've communicated and you've lectured and you've actually hosted within this environment. What for you has been a massive key factor in why this is so important, this topic of leadership? Why out of 5 particular series now, we've got one just for leadership? Why is this so important for us?
I think, thanks for that, Grant. It's 1,000 students per year, hey? And I've been lecturing for
over 1,000.
Over 1,000. So yeah, no, it's an interesting position I find myself in, with the responsibility of the lives of others. I think, just to backtrack, I think when I first entered the university, I took the full responsibility of the lives of my students onto my shoulders. Like I literally, and I found myself, I burnt out very quickly. And I had to ensure that I now developed methods to give them the tools so that they take responsibility for their lives. I mean, in life, you're either in two categories. You're either influenced or you're influencing, and you're not in the middle. And sadly, as we are with the technology and social media, as I stand one lecturer, well, we're two. I have a co-lecturer, so it's two. The ratio is always 1:500. You know, you are fighting against what's already in their mind that has been infiltrated through social media. So you're fighting against images of instant success. You're fighting against images. So you're here telling your students you need to work consistently. You're telling them the hard work, you need to dig, and you're going to dig, you know, the law of the harvest. You're going to plant a seed and you're not going to see the tree until years later. But they're seeing these images on social media to say, but how come that person almost looks like their overnight success? They were awarded this award at 21 and I'm nearing 22 and I have no award to my name. And so it's that concept of leadership, and as Kenneth alluded to a bit earlier on, is it's not a position, it's who you are. It's who you are and who you are influencing. Who are you affecting? And that has to be bigger than yourself. If you're in it for just what is in it for me, I think that you're a manager, because you're managing and you're trying to make sure things go, you know. But a leader is somebody who has, I'm misquoting, sorry, but he passed away, but he was an American businessman. And he says, before you become a leader, everything is about you. Your growth is about you. But once you become a leader, it becomes about everybody else. And I always employ to everybody, in whatever sphere that they're in, you have to keep growing. Because the worst thing that can ever happen is to be under leadership of somebody who's insecure, who thinks you're a threat. So you are under somebody, John Maxwell talks about the law of the lid, that you cannot grow further than the person who is under your command. So if you are not growing as a leader, and you're no longer intimidated by the people behind you, and we've all got somebody behind us. If you're no longer intimidated, you're okay with somebody being a better speaker than you or being a better writer than you, because you're like, I'm okay with that, you know. But if you're insecure as a leader, I say, just go back and work on yourself for a bit, because the harm that you will cause is massive. So I believe, I believe that that's important.
It's so what you share there around the role, right? And I think, we're going to kind of segue also into your into the practicalities now of leadership as well, because I just think it's so fluid in terms of going through this. But what do you think of this, for example, around the fact that, so in my view, in how I describe leadership to someone, especially to my team, is the fact that a leader is like the conductor of an orchestra. So the leader is the conductor of the orchestra. So if you think about, if anyone has seen any sort of musical or anything like that, or has been to somewhere that's live, that has a conductor and now the musicians there, what happens is that the conductor is facing the team, the musicians, and the musicians are playing for the audience. The conductor's back is actually facing the audience. And so the attention of the conductor is purely focused on his or her team, the musicians. And for me, that's how I view leadership, is that your key priority there is to serve your team and give them the best environment for them to be able then to, of course, serve the client, serve the community and so on. Because if you don't have that sort of structure in place, then like you were saying now, Wads and I, people then feel that they can't actually grow because they've got other internal, tensions that are playing against it. And so, Kenneth, can I bring you in here around, the area, if we think about now leaders, and we think about those charismatic leaders, and we think about those ones that are, speaking the most, all right? Can people that are introverts be leaders?
Question. I'm an introvert and I'm proud of it. After this, I'm going to go fall into my little hole and just hide there for a little while. Now, I think introverts can be leaders. I think what you must be very careful of is understanding what you need around you in order to be a leader. So there is massive power in a startup to having a charismatic leader. They're great vision creators, and they see a future that doesn't exist yet, and they can inspire others to do that. But sometimes they remind me, if I had an image of that, is they're great at like encouraging the baby to come out of the mommy. But as soon as that baby's head pops out, they're on to the next challenge. And unless they've got a good team around them to catch that baby as it pops out and nurture it and grow it and allow it to achieve its goals, you'll have 100 good ideas running around with no purpose at end. So if you're charismatic, then you need to surround yourself with people who are more introspective. And if you're more inclined to staying out of the limelight and people, how do they describe it in the US? An introvert is low energy. If you think you're a low energy person, surround yourself with high energy people so that it doesn't quite come off as low energy as that.
Yeah.
But we need each other, and I think that's critical in developing your leadership talents.
If we even, I mean, this whole introvert versus extrovert, right? There's that whole discussion around. So, when we were told in school, I remember they said, oh, introvert, you quiet. Extrovert, you loud. But in actual fact, an extrovert gets their energy from outside, the external, normally from people, from the environment around them. And then an introvert is they can actually get their energy from within, right? And I think that, like what you're saying there, I love that, because again, no matter whether you're an extrovert, whether you're an introvert, the key constant, theme with practicing leadership, what I find is the whole act of practicing it. It's your behavior, it's your example, it's what you are setting. And that doesn't necessarily need to be talking. It can be through what you do around, hitting certain commitments that, if we think about it in work, how many times has our manager or how many times has someone within our team said they're going to do something and then doesn't do it, and it just like dies. And practicing leadership now, if we really focus in on and hone in on this aspect now, the practicalities of it, it really is focusing on saying, okay, well, if I say and I commit that I'm going to do this by Y, I will make sure that I do it. But if I don't do it, I will own that. I will make sure that I own that, and I will take full accountability for any consequence for not being able to do that. And so, Wads and I, from your side now, if you were to think, on the practicality, everyone watching today, and of course when they stream this outside, tell me around what we can start doing today around practicing leadership, because let's be honest here, leadership is not like a particular point in time. You don't achieve leadership and then you say like, that's it, it's done. Like you tick it off, you get a qualification. This is something that is a constant practice. So tell me, what practicalities have you done in your life, and have you even seen from fellow leaders that people can do from today?
Thanks for that, Grant. To quote Mother Teresa, she once said, if you want to go out and change the world, go and love your family. And the people that bring out the real you are the people that know the real you. And if you're unable to lead the people that are already within your sphere of influence, you cannot think that you're able to lead those who are outside. So I believe what we need to start doing, each and every one of us, because I believe we're all leaders in our own right, is to be a full awareness of your strengths and your weaknesses. And I love what Kenneth mentioned. I think for me, it's been that journey. So I'm an extrovert. I don't know if that's obvious, but I'm an extrovert. And
Not at all.
I am married to the definition of an introvert. Like, you don't even come close to him. He is the definition of introvert. If he could stay by himself in his room with his books and his work, he'll be fine. But what I've realized is in the self-development, in a self-awareness and self-reflection of who you are as a leader and what your values are, because personality is something else, but who you are will always come out, whether or not you're an introvert or an extrovert. People can sense that you're in it for the good or you're in it for the bad. But I believe that's introspection, that self-reflection to say, okay, I know I'm an extrovert. So I'm doing a lot of research on personality types, and I've incorporated that in the personal development program, because what we usually do is we categorize people and we say, so extroverts are, like you said, we energize from people outside, and we're more prone to put our hand up when it comes to presenting. Whereas an introvert, and I'm summarizing here, but there are different types of introvert. Where an introvert would much rather write down the speech for the extrovert and say, look, you missed this point, missed that point. I think you must do this, you must do that. And so what I love about Kenneth said is that leadership is not an individual thing. It's about surrounding yourself with people, your ability to identify your own strengths and weaknesses and the strengths and weaknesses of others. So like right now, I'm leading a research article with a colleague of mine who's the complete opposite of me. So I'm an introvert, I'm a big thinker, and I don't take people's feelings into account. She's an introvert, very much into details. But what we found is in using each other's strengths, she's able to say, okay, Wadi, you need to read this article. I found this information. So she's working in her strength. Like we're presenting in the conference in 2 weeks' time. And I asked her just out of courtesy, would you like to present? And she looked at me, she was like, seriously, I'm not presenting. I'll be just the person who makes sure that the slides that we present have not missed everything. And so I think people...
Yeah, what's enough? So I'm gonna jump in there, because what I'm picking up here now around like practically what we can do, right, is you spoke about personality. So for anyone listening, I think one key step, what I would recommend then is that find out like what your personality is. And if you wanna do that, there's a free online tool. It's called Crystal Knows. So it's Crystal, Crystal Knows, Knows. Go to search for Google Crystal Knows and do the free personality test, and it will tell you a bit about what energizes you, what drains you, how you work with people. And I think that's a great piece of advice, around understand what your personality is, what makes you tick, because you need to first know what makes you tick in order to be able to then relate with others. And I think, Kenneth, on your side, then, if you were to think about one or two practical ways of now practicing leadership, what have you found to be, those quick ones that you can start today?
Yeah, thanks, Grant. I think one of the things we have to be very careful of is not to become leaders without a cause. And, it's wonderful to build all these great characteristics, but unless we're aiming towards a particular point, there's no point to it, to make a bad dad joke in the middle of nowhere. So I think that the most practical thing that I believe is possible is, as a leader in an organization or as part of a team, if you don't run your own company, is identify a theme as a starting point, a theme that everybody can buy into. And I think this captures pretty much everything we've kind of spoken about today. But just to rehash it in a single word, the theme is, if you look at a good book, I don't know if this is a good one, but apparently my eldest daughter's doing Romeo and Juliet at the moment as part of the pain she has to bear as a high school student. And if you look at what's the theme of that story, the theme is love is worth dying for. And you can rally around that, and the entire story builds around that. So you as an organization must have a theme that everybody, it must be one-liner. So why do you exist? You say, because we're in a story that's worth dying for. And you've got to come up with it yourself. That's great, and it's very far-casting. So what do you practically do? Because without any action, your mission will never be accomplished. So I think that what you need to do practically is find 3 critical actions everybody on the team can perform every single day that will drive them closer to achieving the goal of the company. This is different from KPIs. That's a management tool. The critical actions, or the 3 critical actions that you pick up, are the 3 things that you know will drive success in your organization. So, for example, on a practical level, my 3 critical actions on a daily basis is get up early, study something I don't know, and have breakfast with the family. And that's how my day starts successfully. From a company context, for example, where, let's say, for example, you say that customer service, gratitude is a key theme in your business. We will always be grateful for the service people will do. Potentially, one of the critical actions in that regard is everybody in the company always says to the people who are leaving the store or leaving the website, whatever it is, to say thank you for choosing us to serve you today.
Yeah.
Just that word thank you, to exercise the theme of gratefulness. And that would be my advice, to create sort of quick wins when you're trying to build a momentum in a company in terms of leadership.
Brilliant, Kenneth. And I think, so if I kind of summarize that into, the practicalities now. So we've got know yourself, find out like literally what makes you tick. And that's, a personality test, for example, is a quick one. We've got understand like what it is what is your cause? And like Simon Sinek says, what is your just cause that, that really kind of inspires you, right? And of course, that then is going to lead to the reason for you getting up in the morning. And with that reason now that you have getting up in the morning, you're now able to then apply certain behaviors, habits, like you were saying now, just get 2 or 3 habits right and form those habits and be consistent with those habits, because it's an ongoing type of practice. And then if we look, and again, this is now translating and transitioning into, how does a future leader look like now in the future here? I think the big thing that that's coming across, even in terms of the questions now, is really on, for leadership to happen, right? Is there an end game? And Wadzanai, do you have someone that you follow? And it's so true. You have someone that you follow, even though you would say that you love practicing leadership.
Absolutely. I think in life, there's always somebody who's doing better than you, the same in you, and worse than you. And I believe all these people are put in your life to keep you steady, and I always believe that, and I'll go back to that growth. You have to keep growing as a leader, and the growth, as Kenneth said, not for your own gain, but for the gain of the greater good. So yeah, I would, I think that's what I would say regarding that.
I mean, if we think about now, someone has also asked a question. I think it was Oyena asked a question around, like, how do you practice leadership if you're in quite a toxic culture, right? If you see someone, for example, that is a manager, and guys, this happens all the time. You've got a manager and that person is toxic, and it literally drains the soul out of you in terms of that day-to-day grind, right? And I think if an audience member right now is sitting in an environment where you are in an environment where you do find the work culture toxic, your environment toxic, you need to understand that you have the opportunity to be that light in the darkness. You have the opportunity now. This is the perfect opportunity to practice clear leadership, all right? Consistent leadership in that particular, in adversity, basically. Because again, nothing is ever just perfect. And like what you were saying is, growth comes from that adversity. You need to sacrifice in order to grow, and you need to be uncomfortable in order to grow. So, Kenneth, from your side, if you were to now, think as a key priority that we have to focus on, all right, whether it be on a daily or weekly and monthly basis, what would you say is a key priority to get right and non-negotiable if we are there to really practice leadership on a going concern basis?
Thanks, Grant. I think that's a great question. Just to remind everyone, when someone who's been asked a question says that's a great question, it means they don't know the answer. So that's a great question. I just want to touch on that toxic nature and use that to talk about the one thing you can do. And I'm going to deal with something a little philosophically and then just do something practical. So anyone who knows me knows I'm a big fan of Viktor Frankl, who was in a concentration camp during the Second World War and came out to write a book called Man's Search for Meaning. He mentions 3 things you need to do to live a life well worth living. One of the things that he mentions there is learn to suffer well. the reality is that none of us can expect to get from the day of our birth to the day we die without running into significant and severe obstacles. They are going to happen. I think all of us who've lived a while will have experienced some of them on a personal or professional level. So, and I learned that a bit too late, but learning to suffer well is probably the most critical thing that you can do to step out of victimhood into hero status, or being the hero of your own story. And the way that you do that practically is to exercise relentless optimism, which I think sounds completely counterintuitive given the situation you might find yourself in. But one of the things that I remember someone saying that I played sport with, and he achieved great things as a sportsman later in life. I asked him, in his entire school career, he lost one game by 2 points. And I asked him how he felt. He said, I was absolutely devastated. I never expect to lose. I said, but what if you go up against the All Blacks or any of those players? He says, same thing. If I lose against them, it shocks me every time. I have no expectation of loss. I have to work through it every single time. And in reality, when you play against the best in the world, you're lucky if you get a 70% success rate. You're probably the best in the world if you get that. So to have a 100% success mindset is the structure that happens. And that also in a toxic work environment plays a beautiful role, because people will gravitate towards the person who's both relentlessly optimistic but practical about it. And you say, okay, this is how we protect ourselves. Remember, guys, this can't last forever. You know, this too shall pass, and all those kind of stories. So if you could take one thing away, just practice relentless optimism.
Brilliant. And I like that in terms of a practical context, is don't be naive, you know, to the reality in which you are in, if it's a toxic work environment. And so if we think now, Wads and I, around, you know, that leader, I mean, COVID-19 has been probably the epitome of a very uncertain time for us, and a time where you really have an opportunity to show your true colors, who you are, going against all odds, being uncomfortable, sacrificing for the betterment of the cause that you're fighting for, or the people that you want to keep safe, right? So in these uncertain times now, what would you, and what have you done, knowing now that we've got 5 minutes left, what would you have done and have done around reassuring your team? Like, what practical steps have you taken to bring that, that reassurance to your team, to make sure that they have a feeling of safety, even though there's so much happening?
Yeah. Thanks, Grant. I'll use the example. There was one time we went on holiday with my husband, and we got to the place. It was Doelstrom, and you know Doelstrom is very cold. Well, we went in winter, and when we went, the hotel didn't have enough blankets. And so I think I was pregnant with my first child, and then my husband shielded me for the whole night. And I just want to use that analogy, that is what a leader is. A leader shields the team. It doesn't duck down. Once you're leading, you don't play an ostrich, you shield your team. So practically what I do with the people that come under me or work with me, I prefer we work together with different skills. I initially, when I'm still getting to know my team, I have weekly meetings. I literally have weekly meetings, and I ask them, how are you doing? What went well? What can we do better? And how can I help you? But in asking those questions, I'm not taking away their responsibility from them. I am empowering them to say, I'm still a free access to you. This is the vision. So I spend a lot of time talking about we don't see it right now. So sometimes you need somebody to show you the vision. So when the clouds come and the storm comes, you can almost like squint through and see what is ahead. And also to allow, and I love what Kenneth says, to allow suffering. And I say this with the utmost sensitivity, but it's that learning how to suffer well. Sometimes you can't just up and leave your job. Those are the realities of some people's lives. Even though you're in a toxic toxic job, you can't just up and leave, you know? And sometimes there are all these messages that go on social media that say, if you're in a toxic manager, leave your job. And I'm like, okay, no, that's great, but I need to pay my bills tomorrow, you know? So it's one of those, finding that strength within that adversity. And like Kenneth said, people will see people are always watching. How do you deal with suffering? And people will gravitate to you. And with time, the culture of your environment will change. It's not a quick fix. If you're looking for a quick fix, a diet pill that's going to make you lose 20 kgs tomorrow for your wedding or for that photo shoot or whatever you want to, it's not a quick fix. It's literally like Kenneth has said, it's a daily, constant, relentless holding on to say, what is it that I want to become? What is it that I see? And pushing through. And there are good, let's not be negative. There are good days. There are some good days where you're like, wow, I'm seeing the fruits of my labor. And then there are some bad days. It's pushing through.
100%. Yeah. And you know, there's that saying, you know, around you will overestimate what you can do in a day, and you will underestimate what you can do in a year. So absolutely. I think that's always to know as we go through this, let's give it the absolute best. Let's make sure that we do it. We most likely are going to overestimate what we can do today. But if you keep on doing that in a consistent manner, you will then look back and realize, whoa, there has been a ton of growth. There has been a ton of learning as well. Yeah. So I think, you know, in closing off, you know, Kenneth, from your side, what is one point that you would like to share, you know, in 30 seconds, what is one point that you would like to share with our audience around what they should be mindful of going into the new day tomorrow with the mindset of, I want to actually practice leadership going forward?
One thing they can do is to pick 2 leaders that they can admire. Preferably one who's younger than them and one that's slightly ahead of them. But don't choose a Richard Branson or an Elon Musk, because they're on Everest and we're trying to climb Kilimanjaro. I'm going to butcher the guy's surname, so I won't even try, but he wrote a book called Flow. And essentially, flow is the idea that you're being sufficiently challenged to stretch yourself, but not so much that you feel incompetent. So find a leader who gives you flow, and then find someone younger than you to keep you relevant. And I say that especially to the guys my age.
I absolutely love that. So actually look for, you know, someone that is setting that example, see it with your own eyes, and then from that inspiration, you know, start practicing a lot of those areas where they're doing it. Love that. And then from your side, Wadzanai, one priority that you think everyone today should take and really start looking at from tomorrow?
4 letters, READ, read. Fill your mind. If you can't be in the space of people who are doing better than you, read their books. Find out what they're doing. Read. This is something I practically do. If you don't have the time, download the audios. Go for a walk, a 30-minute walk when you're in traffic to drop your kids off from school. Those little small things accumulate over time. And then suddenly it becomes second nature. It first of all is like something mechanical, but then it becomes you. You almost like when you're in that crisis, they always say, prepare for the storm before the storm comes. So read. That is what I've been doing practically. A few books. I love Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. I love 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey. That book is my Bible. I literally, every time I'm like, okay, what am I doing? What? I go back, and it's a very practical book to invest in yourself.
Lovely.
So I would say invest in yourself. Yeah.
Brilliant, Wadzanai. And thank you so much, Kenneth, as well, for those points, because I think that the key thing here that I'm getting, that final topic, or that final insights from both of you, is get into someone else's mind and have a look at what they're doing. Have a look at why they did certain things, whether that means following their story, whether it means reading a book that they are involved in, or, you know, are around. Make sure that you learn from others. And really, we don't always know it all. Therefore, we need to always continue that learning curve. So just a massive thanks today to our panelists, Wadzanai and Kenneth. It's been an absolute privilege and super interesting and stimulating having the discussion around leadership. It's always fluid, it's always ongoing. So, you know, there's never a final, you know, point around it. But I think we did a lot today. So thank you so much for providing your insights based on your backgrounds and your experience. And then a massive thank you to Online X for being, for actually, you know, doing the admin around getting this day to happen, and the bootcamp as well. Bearing in mind to the audience that we have got 4 more, you know, series within this 5 series webinar. So make sure that you register in the future for the future events. And of course, a big thank you to Lulaland for bringing this and making this possible, as well as the Dex and Sage sponsors as well. I would like to then invite the actual founder of OnlineX, Dennis, onto the virtual panel for Dennis to say the last words. And just to the audience, if you do want to engage with us, follow the content that we share as well. Please do reach out to us on LinkedIn. Everyone here is very active on it, and that's where you get a whole different insight and get that opportunity to open up the dialogue. So thank you so much.
The biggest challenge we face, like most of our clients and many other businesses out there, is number one, access to cash. We connected with LulaLend. It was extremely easy to get approval, and the very next day, the cash was in the bank. I would recommend LulaLend because they just get it.
Dex Prepare. Make bookkeeping more profitable. Prepare your accounts automatically. Hours-saving software to automatically fetch all your business data into one single view. Connect to over 1,400 suppliers to automatically fetch invoices, statements and bills. Dex Prepare.